What would you do if a wild lioness kept crying for hours after giving birth? And no one understood why. At dawn in the heart of the African savanna, a seasoned mother lay trembling inside a narrow rock den, her deep, haunting calls echoing across the dry land. Rangers who had witnessed countless births before had never seen anything like this. When they finally caught a clear glimpse of what she had delivered, some of them actually gasped in disbelief. It wasn't just rare, it was something that could change everything for the pride and put the newborn in terrible danger. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Stay with me, because what happened next in the wild plains of Tsavo will leave you speechless. Dawn crept slowly over the dry plains of Tsavo east, washing the vast African savanna in pale shades of orange that deepened into molten gold as the sun climbed higher. The air already carried the promise of heat. Even before the full light of morning had settled across the land, waves of warmth shimmered above the cracked earth. A restless wind swept low across the grasslands, lifting red dust into thin spirals that drifted and dissolved like ghosts over the horizon. The acacia trees stood scattered and skeletal, their flat canopies barely offering shade, their thorned branches etched black against the brightening sky. It was the height of the dry season, when waterholes shrank into muddy hollows and survival grew harder with each passing day. Hunger sharpened instincts. Predators moved earlier and more aggressively. In the far distance, the eerie cackling of hyenas rose and fell in uneven bursts carried by the wind. Above them, vultures traced slow, patient circles in the sky, waiting for weakness to reveal itself. The savanna was magnificent, yes, but it was unforgiving. It belonged to those strong enough to endure it. Near a cluster of weathered rock formations rising from the plains like ancient ruins, a pride of lionesses rested in uneasy silence. There were no dominant males in sight, no heavy-maned figures watching from a ridge. Only the females and 2-year-old cubs from a previous season lay beneath the partial shade of stone. Their tawny bodies blended almost seamlessly with the terrain, but their stillness was deceptive. Ears twitched at every distant sound. Eyes flickered toward the same narrow opening in the rocks again and again. Inside that shadowed crevice, hidden from open view, Nala lay on her side. The den was low and tight, barely tall enough for her to shift positions without brushing the rough ceiling. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust and blood. Thin shafts of dawn light slipped through the entrance, illuminating only part of her body, while the rest remained swallowed by darkness. Her flanks heaved with each breath. Muscles rippled beneath her golden coat as another contraction seized her. She clawed at the earth, dragging furrows through the loose soil. Her jaws parted in a low, strained growl, not the roar of dominance or warning, but a raw sound torn from deep within her chest. Sweat darkened her fur. Blood mingled with the red dust beneath her hips, turning the ground into a muted rust color. This was not her first birth. She had carried cubs before, had endured the primal ordeal, and emerged strong. But this time was different. The contractions were longer, harder, unrelenting. Outside the den, one of the other lionesses lifted her head at the sound. Another rose, briefly paced 2 slow steps, then settled again, tail flicking anxiously. None of them entered. Birth was both sacred and dangerous. Instinct dictated distance. Yet their vigilance formed an invisible shield around Nala. No predator would approach unnoticed. Time stretched. The sun edged higher, burning away the coolness of dawn. Nala shifted onto her other side, breathing in short, sharp bursts. Her body trembled with effort. She rolled partially onto her belly, then back again, seeking a position that offered relief. None came. From several hundred meters away, a low engine hummed across the plain. Kido Mwangi had been patrolling the eastern perimeter of the park since before sunrise. He drove slowly, scanning the land with practiced eyes. Years in Tsavo had taught him to read the landscape like a book, the angle of a herd's movement, the sudden flight of birds, the subtle stillness that often preceded violence. He was accustomed to the sounds of lions' territorial roars at dusk, short warning calls during hunts. But what carried across the wind now was different. A prolonged, strained growl. He eased his foot off the accelerator. The vehicle rolled to a gradual stop. The engine idled for a moment before he switched it off entirely. Silence fell around him, broken only by the wind. And that sound again, low, drawn out, heavy with effort. "That's not a hunting call," he murmured to himself. He stepped out carefully and lifted his binoculars. The rocks in the distance shimmered slightly in the rising heat, but he steadied his hands and focused on the narrow crevice he knew lions sometimes used for shelter. Through the glass, he saw her. Nala lay partly in shadow muscles contracting visibly along her abdomen. He exhaled slowly. She's giving birth. He remained where he was. Interfering with a wild birth was unthinkable, unless human life was at risk. His role was observation, documentation, protection from poachers, not intrusion into nature's most intimate act. Another contraction rippled through Nala's body. She arched slightly, teeth-bared claws digging deeper into the soil. Then it happened. With a final, powerful push, a small, slick form slid onto the dusty ground behind her. For a brief second, the tiny shape lay motionless. Kido held his breath. Then the cub twitched. Relief washed over him. The newborn was small but active. It wriggled awkwardly, instinct guiding it forward. Nala turned her head immediately, fatigue forgotten. She bent to lick the cub vigorously, removing membrane and dust, with quick, purposeful strokes of her tongue. The cub let out a faint, high-pitched squeak, the first sound of its life. "Good," Kido whispered. "That's good." The cub struggled forward, blind and unsteady but determined. It pressed against Nala's belly, seeking warmth, seeking milk. Within moments, it found a teat and began to suckle clumsily. Life, fragile but real, had taken hold. But Nala did not relax. Her breathing remained labored. Instead of curling protectively around the cub, she stiffened again. Another contraction seized her stronger than before. Her body shuddered violently. Kido frowned. "There's another one." Inside the den, Nala's movements grew erratic. She shifted, groaned, rolled partially onto her side. The first cub clung stubbornly to her fur, tiny paws kneading instinctively. Outside, the other lionesses rose fully now, ears pricked. Something in Nala's tone, something strained and urgent, rippled through them. Minutes passed. Then more. The sun climbed high enough that light pierced deeper into the den. Sweat glistened on Nala's flank. She seemed drained, yet her body demanded more. Finally, with a deep, guttural roar, she pushed again. A second cub slid free onto the sand. It lay still. Kido's heart hammered. "Come on. Move." There was a long, terrible pause, 2 seconds, maybe 3, that felt like an eternity. Then the small body twitched. But something was wrong. Nala turned her head sharply toward the second cub. For a heartbeat, she did not move. She did not immediately begin cleaning it as she had the first. Instead, she stared. She rose slightly on her forelegs and took a half step back. From outside, one of the lionesses uttered a questioning grunt. Inside the den, Nala emitted a low, resonant growl, not aggressive, but uncertain. It rolled through the rocks and out into the open air, carrying a tone Kido had never heard before. He adjusted the focus of his binoculars. The light reflecting from the den entrance created glare, and for a moment he saw only brightness. He narrowed his eyes and steadied his breathing. The image sharpened. The second cub's coat did not carry the usual muted golden hue of newborn lions. It was pale. Not dusty pale. Not cream. White. The tiny body lay against the rust-colored earth like a fragment of cloud fallen from the sky. Its fur was almost entirely white, broken only by the faintest shadow of markings. In the half-light of the den, it seemed to glow. Keto blinked once, thinking the glare had distorted his vision. He adjusted the focus again. Still white, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. That's impossible. Inside the den, Nala leaned forward, slowly, nostrils flaring, as she inhaled the scent of the cub. The first cub continued to nurse, oblivious. But the second struggled, weakly, legs trembling. The contrast between them was stark, one golden and blending with the earth, the other luminous against the dark rock. Nala lowered her head and sniffed the white cub again. Then she let out a long, low sound, deep, vibrating, almost mournful. Do you think the white lion cub can survive in such a harsh world? Tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe before we jump into the most intense part of the story. From his vantage point on the rise, Keto slowly lowered his binoculars, though the image of the white cub remained burned into his mind. For a few seconds, he simply stood there listening to the wind scrape across the dry grass. He had worked in Tsavo long enough to know that extraordinary moments in the wild were almost always followed by danger. He reached for the radio clipped to his vest. There was a brief hesitation. He understood the weight of what he was about to report. Then he pressed the transmit button. "Base, this is Keto. I have a situation at the Eastern Rock Formation near Sector 12. Lioness has delivered 2 cubs. Second cub appears abnormal, possibly white." A pause crackled over the line. "Repeat that, Keto White," he said quietly. "The cub's coat is nearly completely white. I've never seen anything like it." Static hummed for a moment as the message moved through the early morning shift. Voices murmured in the background at the station. Finally, the response came back calm but firm. "Maintain distance. Do not approach the Pride. Continue visual monitoring. We're dispatching a small team to your coordinates." "Copy that," Keto replied. He clipped the radio back in place and lifted the binoculars again. Inside the den, Nala had finally leaned down and begun licking the white cub, though her movements were slower, almost cautious. The first cub nursed steadily, its tiny paws kneading against her belly. The white cub, however, struggled to coordinate its limbs. Its back legs trembled as it attempted to push itself upright. Within 20 minutes, a dust trail appeared along the track, leading toward the rock formation. A single open-top vehicle approached and stopped several hundred meters away. The rangers stepped out quietly, careful not to slam doors or speak loudly. Among them was Dr. Amina Hassan. She carried a pair of high-powered binoculars and a camera with a long telephoto lens. The sun caught the silver threads at her temples as she scanned the terrain. Amina had spent over 20 years studying lion populations across Kenya and Tanzania. She had assisted in relocations, tracked prides through drought-documented genetic variations. She had seen rare coat patterns, melanistic anomalies, and cubs born weak and deformed. But when she lifted her binoculars and focused on the den, she did not speak for several seconds. One of the younger rangers leaned closer. "What do you see?" Amina exhaled slowly. "I see something we may never see again," she murmured. The morning light had shifted just enough to illuminate the den entrance clearly. The white cub's coat reflected the sun in sharp contrast to the warm sandstone around it. Even from this distance, its pale fur was unmistakable. "That's not albinism," Amina whispered. "Look at the pigmentation around the nose. That's likely a recessive leucistic mutation. A white lion. The younger ranger's eyebrows shot up. In the wild, she confirmed softly. She lowered the binoculars and addressed the group in a hushed tone. White lions are not a separate species. They're a rare genetic expression. Both parents must carry the recessive gene. The probability of this happening naturally is extremely low. How low? Keto asked quietly. In open populations like Savo, she said. Almost unheard of. A slow breath escaped from one of the rangers as the magnitude of the moment settled over them. They were witnessing something biologically extraordinary. But Amina's gaze did not linger on the brilliance of the coat. It shifted back to the cub's movements. Look at its hind legs, she said. Through the binoculars, the difference was subtle, but clear. The first cub had already managed to lift its body, briefly wobbling, but upright for a few seconds before collapsing back against its mother. The white cub, however, seemed delayed. Its front paws pressed into the soil, but its back legs splayed awkwardly behind it. It's weak, Keto said. Yes, Amina replied, and weakness in the first hours can be fatal. They watched as the white cub attempted to crawl toward Nala's belly. It moved, but slowly, too slowly. Its head bobbed uncertainly. Its back leg slipped in the loose dust. In the first few hours, Amina continued quietly, a cub needs colostrum. The first milk, it carries antibodies. Without it, the immune system is compromised from the start. The cub tried to push itself upright. For a moment, it seemed almost successful. Its front legs straightened, lifting its chest off the ground. Its small white body trembled in the bright light. Then its hind legs buckled, and it toppled sideways. Keto tightened his grip on the binoculars. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. Inside the den, Nala turned her head sharply at the fall. She leaned down and licked the cub's face, nudging it gently with her nose. The first cub continued to nurse steadily, unaware of the imbalance beside it. "Time is against it," Amina said softly. Around the den, the other lionesses had begun to move more frequently. One rose and paced 3 slow steps before settling again. Another lifted her head, nostrils flaring, sensing the lingering scent of blood. The air shifted. A warm gust of wind swept across the plains, and Amina felt it brush her cheek. "Wind's changing direction," she said quietly. Keto noticed it too. The breeze now carried the scent from the den outward toward the open savanna. Blood and birth fluids had a way of traveling farther than expected in dry air. Above them, a pair of vultures dipped lower in their circular pattern. And then Keto saw something else. Movement in the grass at the edge of the plain. He adjusted his focus. Dark shapes, low to the ground. "There," he said sharply but quietly. 9 o'clock from the den. Amina followed his line of sight. A cluster of hyenas emerged from behind a sparse acacia grove. Their shoulders hunched, their noses lifted high. They did not run. They did not rush. They moved in a slow arc, testing the wind, gauging distance. Hyenas were opportunists, patient, calculating. They knew that a lioness who had just given birth would be exhausted. They knew cubs were vulnerable. "They've picked up the scent," Keto said into his radio. "Hyena pack approaching from the south. Approximately 6 individuals." "Copy," came the reply. "Maintain visual only." The hyenas did not advance directly. Instead, they spread slightly, forming a loose semicircle at a safe distance. One of them stopped and sat on its haunches, watching. Inside the den, the white cub attempted once more to rise. Its front legs pushed against the sand claws, scratching for traction. Its body lifted briefly, but its hindquarters sagged. It fell forward, nose hitting the dirt. Nala let out a low, tense growl. The first cub shifted slightly, but continued nursing. The hyenas edged closer just a few steps. The pride reacted. One of the lionesses outside the den rose fully and turned toward the grass. Her tail flicked sharply. Another stood beside her, ears forward. But none of them charged yet. They were measuring. Inside the den, the white cub made another effort. This time it managed to lift its chest and hold for a heartbeat longer. Its small body trembled violently, every muscle straining. The sunlight striking its coat made it glow against the shadowed rock. "It's so visible," Amina murmured. "That color makes it stand out. It won't blend." The cub's legs shook, then collapsed. He lay still for 2 seconds, too still. Keto felt his pulse in his throat. "Move," he whispered. "Move." The cub twitched. Nala lowered her head again and nudged it firmly. She let out a short, sharp growl, not of fear, but of insistence. The hyenas shifted again, emboldened by the continued instability in the den. One stood and took 3 measured steps forward. "Distance?" Amina asked. 40 meters, Keto replied. "Too close." But the rangers could do nothing. Park regulations were clear. Intervention was only permitted if human life was in immediate danger. Nature was allowed to unfold, even when brutal. The wind gusted again, carrying the scent more strongly. The hyenas paused, sniffing, their ears swiveling. The pride tightened. Nala did not leave the den entrance. She stood partially over the 2 cubs, now positioning her body between them and the open plain. Her ribs still rose and fell heavily from the exertion of birth. The white cub tried again. Its front paws dug deeper into the sand. Its small claws caught. It pulled its chest upright. For a fragile second it held. Its back legs trembled uncontrollably. "Stand," Amina whispered. "Stand, little one." The cub wobbled, then collapsed yet again, this time staying down longer than before. The hyena closest to the den lowered its head and let out a soft, unsettling chuckle. The air around the rangers felt suffocating. "If they charge now," one of the younger rangers muttered. "They won't rush yet," Amina said, though her voice lacked full certainty. "They're waiting for weakness." Nala saw the movement before any of the others did. It was not the sound that alerted her first, but the shift in the grass and the faint ripple against the wind that did not belong to it. In one fluid motion, she surged to her feet. Her muscles, still trembling from the strain of birth, tightened with sudden purpose. She stepped forward out of the den entrance, placing her body squarely between the approaching hyenas and her newborn cubs. Her tail dropped low, her ears flattened against her skull. Every line of her body transformed from exhausted mother to lethal defender. Behind her, the healthy cub instinctively scrambled backward, pressing its small body against the cool rock wall. The white cub, however, remained slightly closer to the opening, its pale fur exposed in the harsh morning light. It lay at an angle too visible, too vulnerable. The hyenas were now less than 50 meters away. Outside the den, the pride had begun to stir more urgently. One lioness shifted position. Another took several measured steps forward, but did not yet charge. They were gauging distance, timing, risk. Nala opened her jaws and released a roar that tore through the air. It was not the territorial roar of dusk. It was raw and thunderous, vibrating against the stone and carrying across the savanna in a deep warning surge. The sound rolled over the plains and echoed between the scattered rock formations. The hyenas halted. For a moment the wind seemed to stop with them. One hyena tilted its head, studying her. Then cautiously it took another step forward, testing. Nala did not retreat. She did not glance back at her cubs. Though her body still ached and her flanks heaved from recent labor, She stood her ground. She had no choice. The distance between her and the cubs had to remain minimal. If she moved too far out, the den would be exposed. Inside the shadow of the rocks, the healthy cub crawled toward its pale sibling. It made small, uncertain chirping sounds, nudging the white cub's shoulder with its tiny head. The white cub responded with a weak twitch, its limbs unsteady. The two fragile bodies pressed closer together in the dimness of the den. The white cub tried again. It planted its front paws into the sand claws, scraping for grip. Its hind legs trembled violently, slipping against the fine dust. Slowly, painfully, it lifted its chest a few centimeters off the ground. It wobbled. The sunlight striking its coat made it glow like a beacon. Outside, one of the hyenas leaned forward, its dark eyes fixed on the pale form. The cub's hind legs buckled, and it tipped sideways. It lay there, breathing fast. Then it tried again. This time it managed to lift itself slightly higher. Its small ribs expanded and contracted rapidly. Its front legs locked straight for a heartbeat longer. Then its back legs gave out again. It fell. Nala's head snapped back toward the den entrance at the sound of her cub hitting the ground. Her growl lowered in pitch, thick with something that was no longer only aggression, it was urgency. From the ridge, Keto tightened his grip on the binoculars. "Come on," he whispered under his breath. Beside him, none of the rangers spoke. The radio remained silent. Every one of them understood the same unspoken rule: they could not intervene, not unless human lives were at risk. Amina leaned forward slightly. "It has to stand," she murmured. "Now." The hyenas edged closer. The gap shrank to 40 meters, then 35. The white cub drew in a long, shaky breath. Its tiny body quivered. It pushed upward again. Its front legs held. Its back legs wavered, splaying awkwardly. The cub's body tilted forward dangerously off balance. One of the hyenas suddenly advanced 3 quick steps, testing the boundary. Dust rose beneath its paws. Nala reacted instantly. She took a half step outward, jaws open, and released another deafening roar that shook the air. The hyena faltered, but did not retreat. The white cub's legs trembled harder. It was seconds away from collapsing again. And then, as the cub began to tip forward, Nala moved. She pivoted with astonishing speed for a lioness who had just given birth. Her forelegs shot out. Her muzzle dipped low. In one precise motion, she braced her paw and shoulder beneath the falling cub, steadying its small frame before it struck the ground. The white cub leaned against her leg. For a moment, time slowed. Nala did not roar. She did not snarl. She simply stood there, solid and immovable, her body creating a wall, her foreleg acting as a brace. The cub's trembling frame steadied. The hyenas paused again, confused by the sudden shift. The white cub adjusted its footing. When Nala gradually withdrew her support, the cub remained upright. All 4 paws touched the earth. Its body shook violently, but it did not fall. The healthy cub emitted a short, high-pitched chirp. Keto exhaled in disbelief. "It's standing," Amina whispered. "This is it. This is survival." The cub held its position for a full second, then another. Behind Nala, the pride had begun to close ranks. 2 lionesses moved forward from the left flank. Another approached from the right, their bodies low, silent, coordinated. But the hyenas had made their decision. Seeing the cub still unsteady, they spread into a loose arc formation, advancing several meters closer. Now the distance between them and the den was only a handful of strides. Nala backed into the den entrance, positioning herself directly at the opening. Her spine arched, her teeth bared. The 2 cubs remained just behind her. The hyenas fanned out further, forming a semicircle. One of them lunged. It was sudden, fast, reckless. Nala launched forward to meet it. Their bodies collided with a thud that echoed against the rocks. She snapped her jaws, catching fur and skin. The hyena yelped sharply. Another hyena darted in from the side. Before it could close the distance, 3 lionesses burst from behind the rock formation. They had returned from the hunt. Without hesitation, they joined the fray. One lioness slammed into a hyena's flank, knocking it sideways. Another clamped her jaws around a hyena's shoulder. Claws raked across coarse fur. Teeth snapped. Dust exploded upward, swirling into a blinding cloud. The savanna filled with snarls and shrieks. The hyenas attempted to regroup, but the pride now held the advantage. The coordinated attack from multiple angles disrupted their formation. One hyena tried to circle back toward the den. Nala cut it off with a brutal swipe of her paw. Another hyena lunged, but was intercepted mid-leap by a second lioness. For several intense minutes, the clash continued, violent, chaotic, primal. Then gradually, the hyenas began to retreat. They stepped backward in jerky movements, still snarling, still testing, but losing ground. One turned fully and ran. Another followed. Within moments, the entire pack withdrew into the tall grass, their silhouettes fading into the shimmering heat. Silence fell again. Before the dust had fully settled from the clash, one of the rangers raised his camera again. He had been shooting cautiously through a long telephoto lens throughout the confrontation, careful not to shift position or draw attention. Now, as the hyenas retreated into the tall grass and the pride reformed its protective arc, he focused tightly on the den entrance. There it was. The white cub stood beside Nala, its small body still trembling, but upright, pressed close to her powerful foreleg. Midday sunlight poured across the rocks, catching the pale fur and setting it ablaze against the dark stone behind it. The contrast was almost unreal, the fragile, luminous cub beside the scarred, battle-worn strength of its mother. The ranger exhaled slowly and pressed the shutter. Click. The image froze a moment that had almost ended in tragedy. He lowered the camera only long enough to review it once, just to be certain the focus was sharp. It was. The white cub was unmistakable. He transmitted the file back to the station as part of his official report. Rare genetic anomaly observed. Cub standing and feeding. Pride stable for now. Within the small communications office at the ranger station, the photo appeared on a monitor. A communications officer stared at the screen in disbelief. "Is this real?" she asked aloud. "It's from Keto's lens," another ranger replied. "That's as real as it gets." What began as documentation quickly became something larger. The park's media officer, thinking only of conservation awareness and pride in the region's biodiversity, posted the image on the official Tsavo East page with a simple caption, "A rare white lion cub, born this morning in Tsavo." Nature continues to surprise us. No one expected what happened next. Within an hour, the image had been shared hundreds of times. By midday, it had spread beyond Kenya. Comments flooded in from across continents. "Is this photoshopped? I've never seen a white lion in the wild." This is a miracle. Wildlife biologists began weighing in online, confirming the rarity of leucistic lions. Conservation groups reposted the image with educational notes about genetic diversity. News outlets reached out for statements. From a quiet birth in a remote rock den, and the white cub had become a global phenomenon in a single afternoon. Back at the station, however, the mood was not celebratory. Keto stood at the end of a small wooden table in the ranger briefing room, arms folded across his chest. The photograph glowed on a laptop screen in front of them. "This kind of attention is dangerous," he said quietly. Amina nodded. "Very." The room fell silent. White lions, especially those born in the wild, could fetch staggering prices on the black market. Illegal wildlife traffickers were known to track viral stories seeking vulnerable, high-value targets. "We can't let this become an invitation," one ranger muttered. "It won't," Keto replied firmly. "We increase patrol rotations immediately." Excitement had shifted into resolve. Within hours, additional patrol routes were established around the rock formation. Rangers rotated in staggered intervals, avoiding predictable patterns. Camera traps were placed discreetly along potential access paths. Vehicles kept their distance, but remained close enough for rapid response. All precautions were taken quietly. No sudden movements near the pride, no disturbance of their natural rhythm. The goal was protection without intrusion. Meanwhile, life at the den continued under constant watch. Each morning, Keto climbed to the same vantage point with his binoculars. He would sit there for hours in the heat, scanning the rocks, tracking every shift of shadow. The white cub still moved more slowly than its sibling during those first days. When the healthy cub stumbled and recovered easily, the white cub sometimes lagged a second behind. Its hind legs were no longer collapsing completely, but they lacked the strength of its brother. Nala never strayed far from it. Whenever the pride shifted position, she subtly angled her body so the white cub remained closer to the rock wall than the open plain. If a vulture dipped too low, her ears flicked instantly upward. If grass rustled unexpectedly, she moved first, placing herself between the cub and the sound. The pride's formation resembled an unspoken shield. Days passed. Gradually, the trembling lessened. One morning, Keto noticed something different. The white cub stood without wobbling. Its legs held steady for several seconds before it began walking short steps, careful but balanced. "It's stronger," he said softly into his radio. "Good," came the reply from base. By the fourth day, the white cub no longer dragged its hind paws. Its movements were deliberate, almost cautious, but coordinated. The pale fur that had once been streaked with dust and birth fluids began to look cleaner, smoother. Under the sun, it shone almost silver. The first playful interaction came unexpectedly. The healthy cub pounced clumsily at its sibling, batting at its tail. The white cub tumbled sideways, then scrambled back upright. Instead of collapsing, it swatted back. The two rolled across the sand in a burst of awkward energy. Nala watched from a few meters away, ears upright, alert, but no longer tense. For the first time since the birth, the air around the den felt lighter. Even the other lionesses seemed to relax. One approached, slowly lowering her head to sniff the white cub. There had been subtle distance at first, a natural caution around something visually different. But now she leaned down and gently licked the cub's forehead. The white cub froze briefly, then leaned into the contact. Acceptance had begun. That night, the pride slept closer together. The white cub lay between two lionesses, protected by warmth and scent. It was no longer separated or kept at the edge. It belonged. The viral image continued circulating globally. Conservation blogs called it the ghost of Tsavo. Researchers quietly updated genetic records, noting the likely recessive gene presence within the pride's lineage. Tourists arrived hoping for a glimpse, but strict distance rules were enforced. The cub was observed only from afar. Protection remained discreet but vigilant. Then one early morning, Keto witnessed something that stilled him completely. The sky was still tinged with the faintest blue-gray before sunrise. A cool breeze moved through the grass. Nala emerged from the den and began walking across the open plain. Behind her, two small shapes followed. The healthy cub trotted confidently, bounding ahead and circling back. And the white cub, no longer hesitant, ran beside its sibling, matching pace, step for step. It did not lag. It did not stumble. Its white coat caught the rising sun, glowing like a moving ember against the golden grass. Keto lowered his binoculars slowly. "I didn't think we'd see this," he whispered. From the edge of the plain, the pride followed in silent procession. No hyenas lingered nearby. No immediate threats stirred in the grass. What had once seemed impossible was now unfolding naturally before him. The white cub was no longer merely surviving. It was thriving. Over the following weeks, the cub became an emblem of Tsavo's resilience. Rangers spoke of it with quiet pride. Scientists documented its development carefully. Visitors were reminded that what they witnessed from afar was not a spectacle, but a testament to nature's unpredictability. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and turned the savanna into a sea of amber light, Nala led her cubs through tall grass that swayed like waves around their small bodies. The pride trailed behind in dignified silence. The white cub moved with confidence, now weaving between clumps of grass, occasionally glancing back toward its mother, before bounding forward again. Its coat shone against the golden horizon, like a streak of living light. There were no hyenas in sight, no dust rising from battle, just wind grass and the steady rhythm of paws on earth. The cub that had nearly failed to stand in its first hour of life now ran across one of the harshest landscapes on the continent. It was not a miracle because of its color. It was a miracle because it endured. Because a mother had braced her body beneath it when it could not stand alone. Because a pride had fought when danger closed in. Because instinct, strength, and vigilance had converged in a single fragile life. Time moved quietly on the savanna, but not in the shadows of the human world. One night in a town near the Kenya-Tanzania border, the image appeared again, this time on a private hunting blog that had no interest in conservation. The caption was brief and cold: "Rare white lion cub spotted in Tsavo. Unconfirmed survival." Beneath it, anonymous accounts began discussing numbers. A hidden forum lit up with phrases like "collector value private reserve demand" and "rare white lion price." The language was stripped of wonder. It turned a living animal into inventory. In a dim back room behind a roadside bar, 3 men sat around a cheap wooden table with a phone propped between them. The cracked screen showed the now famous image, the pale cub standing beside Nala in the mouth of the den. One of the men leaned back and let out a low whistle. "That cub is worth more alive than ivory." Another narrowed his eyes. "If it's real?" "It's real," the first man said. "Look at the source." Park photo. They were proud enough to post it themselves. The third man, older and quieter, tapped ash into an empty tin. Alive, then. Not a skin, not bones. A live cub to a private breeder maybe across the border. And the mother. The older man shrugged. "The mother is a problem. Problems are solved." They spoke about routes, about fuel, about timing, about fences and ranger response times. No one raised his voice. No one sounded excited. That was what made it worse. To them, the white cub was not miraculous. It was profitable. Back in Tsavo, the first warning came not from a gunshot or a snare, but from tracks. A ranger on morning patrol found tire marks in a restricted stretch of dirt road that should have been empty. They were recent cutting across a patch of ground closed to visitors and far beyond the approved safari routes. The vehicle had not come close enough to the den to alarm the pride, but it had no business being there at all. By noon, another sign appeared. One of the park's camera traps mounted low between thorn scrub and rock captured a brief smear of headlights moving across the frame sometime after midnight. The image was poor. No plate, no faces, just a flash of a white light and the outline of a vehicle pausing and then turning away. No tourist permit had been issued for that sector. When Quito saw the footage, a cold weight settled in his stomach. He went back through the patrol GPS logs in the operations room, replaying routes, timestamps, and dead zones. At first, everything looked normal. Then he noticed it one short window in the night, when a camera relay near the eastern ridge had suffered interference. It had not failed completely. It had simply gone blind for 6 minutes. 6 minutes in exactly the corridor leading toward the Pride's territory. Quito stared at the screen, jaw tight. Someone's watching them. Amina, standing beside him, crossed her arms. "You think they're testing the response?" "I think they're mapping us," he said. "Routes, timing, blind spots. Seeing how close they can get." Neither of them needed to say the next part out loud. The White Cub's fame had reached the wrong people. By evening, the ranger station raised the threat level. Armed night patrols were added. Checkpoints near the eastern boundary were reinforced. Extra units were requested from the Central Anti-Poaching Division. The response stayed quiet, disciplined, controlled. No public statement, no social media update, nothing that would confirm how seriously the park was taking the threat. Quito briefed the team in a hard, level voice. "Assume they've seen the terrain. Assume they know the cub is alive. No solo patrols after dark. If you see lights where there should be none, you report first and move second. We are not giving them one easy opening." That night, Tsavo felt different. The darkness seemed heavier. Wind moved low over the plain, carrying dry grit against the vehicles. Somewhere far off, an engine muttered and died. Then silence. Then, minutes later, another faint sound, too distant to place, but mechanical. From the ridge, Quito watched through night optics, while below him the Pride shifted uneasily around the rocks. Nala sensed it too. She rose in the dark, nudged the cubs awake, and moved them from the exposed side of the formation to a narrower shelf of stone behind the den. She did it without panic, but quickly. The healthy cub followed at once. The White Cub hesitated, then scrambled after her pale fur ghostly in the moonlight. "There," whispered one of the rangers. A brief glow flickered deep in the brush to the south. A flashlight, or maybe a covered lamp, blinked once and vanished. Quito lifted his radio. Possible visual. South brush line. Lights just cut out. Within minutes, a response team moved in a wide circle. Engines killed far-out boots, taking over where wheels would make too much noise. They spread silently through thorn and dust, flashlights, hooded rifles ready. They found no men, but they found evidence. About 300 meters from the den, concealed beneath scrub and anchored low between two bushes, lay a wire snare strong enough to maim a large animal. Nearby half-buried tire prints marked a stop-and-wait position. The poachers had been there, close enough to test the perimeter, close enough to study the ground, close enough to prove they intended to return. Quito crouched over the snare with a look of contained anger. "They're not guessing anymore," he said. "They're hunting." When he returned to the station just before dawn, he paused in front of the same image that had started it, all the White Cub beside Nala, glowing in the sunlight. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost to himself, he asked, "Did we protect it? Or expose it?" No one answered. Because the truth was that both could be true at once, and the danger had not passed. If human greed was one enemy, the land itself soon became another. The rains should have come. They did not. Week after week, the clouds built weakly on the horizon and broke apart before reaching Tsavo. The grass lost what little green remained and turned brittle gray. Dust coated the leaves of the acacias. Waterholes shrank into foul-smelling basins of mud. Herds of antelope began moving farther and farther from their usual routes, following the rumor of water rather than the memory of safety. The pride felt it almost immediately. Hunts grew harder. The lionesses would leave at dusk and return late with empty jaws and tired eyes. Once they chased a young zebra across half a kilometer of broken ground and lost it when the herd split around a dry gully. Another time, they stalked a pair of impala for nearly an hour, only for the wind to betray them at the last second. The cubs were old enough now to travel farther with the pride, but the white cub still tired sooner than its sibling during long movements. Not weak anymore, but not as efficient. Not yet. Nala was losing weight. Keto could see it even from a distance. Her ribs showed more clearly beneath her coat. Her shoulders looked sharper. And at night from the ridge, he sometimes heard the white cub crying small, insistent sounds in the dark. "Milk is dropping," Amina said quietly after one such night. If the prey keeps moving, the mothers won't produce enough. The white cub pushed harder at Nala's belly when it fed now, frustrated by what it could not draw. Sometimes it would stop and cry softly, and Nala would lower her head and lick it in silence as if apology could replace nourishment. Eventually, the rocks were no longer enough. The pride had to move. They left the den at dawn and traveled toward a dry river corridor where pockets of prey still passed through. It was dangerous country, more open, more exposed, and close to the range of an unfamiliar male coalition. But staying meant starvation. The shift changed everything. The riverbed was lined with thorn trees, broken banks, and the stale smell of old water. Buffalo sign appeared first deep prints, dung-torn earth. Then one evening, the pride spotted a small herd moving slow with thirst. The lionesses spread instinctively. Even weakened by hunger, they coordinated with lethal focus. One moved left through scrub. Another crouched along the bank. Nala stayed slightly back, conserving strength for the final rush. The ambush was risky from the start. Buffalo were no antelope. A wounded adult could kill a lioness with a single horn thrust. But hunger had stripped the pride of caution. The charge came all at once. Dust erupted. Hooves thundered. One lioness leaped and missed, rolling hard. Another caught the flank of a young bull but was thrown aside. Nala lunged low and held on. For a terrifying moment, the buffalo drove forward with her clinging to its shoulder. Then two more lionesses hit from the side. The struggle was brutal and fast. When it ended, one lioness limped away with a bloody cut along her foreleg, but the buffalo was down. That night, the cubs approached meat for the first time with real urgency. The healthy cub shoved forward, eagerly, muzzle already red within minutes. The white cub came more slowly. It stopped at the edge of the carcass, nostrils flaring at the overwhelming smell of blood and heat. It stepped back. Then Nala tore loose a softer strip and dropped it near its paws. The cub stared, licked, bit tentatively. Then again. Keto, watching through binoculars from a distant rise, allowed himself a small breath of relief. "Good," he murmured. "That's good." It was a turning point. The cub was no longer surviving only on its mother. It was beginning the long shift toward independence. But Savo was not finished testing it. The sandstorm came with almost no warning. Late one afternoon, the sky turned copper, then brown. Wind slammed across the plain so suddenly that birds dropped low and vanished into thorn cover. The pride bunched instinctively, heads down. Within minutes, the storm was on them, a wall of sand and dust, so thick it erased distance, then shape, then everything. Keto and the patrol team had to stop their vehicle entirely and cover their faces. Out in the chaos, the cubs disappeared from sight. Nala roared once, then again, the sound ripped apart by the wind. She moved blind through the storm, searching by scent more than vision. The healthy cub answered quickly from somewhere close. The white cub did not. For one stretched terrible minute, even the rangers could hear the fear in her calls. Then through the screaming sand, a smaller cry answered. Nala turned sharply and lunged toward the sound. When the storm finally began to weaken, Keto caught a blurred glimpse of her body curled around both cubs behind a bank of scrub, shielding them from the last of the blast. When the sky cleared, the white cub emerged coated in dust, but alive, pressed tightly against her flank. Stronger now, yes. But the land remained merciless. And then came the next threat, the oldest and most brutal law of lion life. It started at sunset, with a roar that did not belong. The sound rolled across the dry river territory, deep and unfamiliar, a challenge shaped in muscle and certainty. Every lioness in the pride froze. Nala's head came up instantly. From the far ridge, 2 males appeared over the course of the next day, young, broad-shouldered, black-maned, moving with the confidence of animals looking to take, not pass through. They patrolled the edge of the pride's range, scent-marking thorn trunks and roaring at dusk. Amina heard the report over radio and closed her eyes for a second. If they mean to take the territory, she said the cubs are in danger. Keto knew why. Incoming males often killed cubs that were not their own. It brought females back into breeding condition faster. Cruel by human standards, efficient by nature's. And the white cub, bright, visible, unforgettable, would be the easiest to spot. The first close encounter came at twilight. One of the males approached within sight of the pride head high mane, dark against the dying light. The lionesses formed a wall at once, growling low. The cubs were shoved backward into scrub and shadow. The white cub vanished behind a rock shelf, breathing fast. The male stopped, stared, and took another step. Nala answered with a roar so fierce it startled even the rangers listening from the ridge. What followed over the next 2 days was less a single battle than a grinding territorial collapse. The lionesses held together, lunging, bluffing, retreating, regrouping. But the new males were larger, fresher, relentless. Each clash pushed the pride a little farther back. At the height of it, when dust and twilight hid everything beyond a few body lengths, Nala made her choice. She took the white cub by the scruff and drove it into a narrow split in the rocks too tight for a large male to enter easily. The healthy cub was pulled with it. She nosed them deep into the crevice, then turned and ran back toward the open ground. Not away, toward the danger. Keto saw it through his binoculars and went still. She's drawing them off. One of the black-maned males caught her movement and followed. Another swung wide, scenting. For one awful minute, one of them turned toward the rock cleft where the cubs hid. Inside the crack, the white cub pressed flat and silent, pale eyes wide. The male lowered his head, and Nala hit him from the side with everything she had left. It was not a winning attack. It was a desperate one. Claws, teeth, fury, motherhood. She bought seconds, then more seconds. Enough for the rest of the lionesses to crash in and turn confusion into chaos. By nightfall, the males had effectively taken the territory. But the cubs were still alive. That was the part none of the rangers had expected. For reasons Amina would later only half explain, perhaps the cubs were already old enough. Perhaps the pride's resistance altered the calculus. Perhaps the males were more interested in control than the slaughter. The coalition did not return to hunt them down. They asserted dominance. They shadowed the females. They roared from the ridges and fed first at kills. But they did not kill the white cub. It was not safety. It was a narrow, astonishing mercy. Months later, under a softer sky and on land that had finally tasted rain. Quito watched from a distance as the Pride moved across a green stretch of savanna. One of the black-maned males walked ahead, powerful and calm. Behind him came the lionesses, and among them, larger, now leaner, stronger, moved the white cub. No longer a trembling newborn, no longer the fragile thing that had glowed helplessly in the mouth of a den. It walked with steady steps beside the new order of the Pride, carrying its impossible coat through a world that had tried again and again to erase it. And somehow, it was still here. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this incredible story. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support helps us continue bringing amazing wildlife stories from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next adventure.